There are a ton of good AI use cases in construction, and after over 100 calls with members from our community, here are my favorite 7. And they fall into 3 core categories. The first is that they genuinely save you time. The second is that they actually reduce the risk that you're carrying on a project. And the third are those things that we know we should be doing, but often unable with the resources we've got. And the third typically falls into the second. Now, the most important thing being that we keep in mind is this genuinely helping me run my business or projects better, and that we're not just using AI for AI's sake and overlying on it for things that it's actually not good at, like key decision making that requires experience to be able to make. Now, when we're talking about use case, what we're essentially saying is a workflow, and that can come in many forms. So an example of a workflow is, for example, a Claude or ChatGPT skill, and you can link multiple of those together to be able to create more and more in-depth workflows, so that one feeds onto the next, and it allows you to put those key checkpoints in a way that makes it easy to review, so you always know what's going on with inside a workflow or a skill. And the second point to that is that the fundamental, I guess, framework of what the skill is, which is essentially a combination of a process, is capturing a process within that, giving it the documents that it needs and access to the context it needs to be able to do it well. And so the output can be tightly refined so that it's giving you reliable output each time. This concept is clearly catching on a lot, because Claude started things off with the skill. They've now made their way across to ChatGPT, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, Cowork, etc. And also I've seen increasingly that these harnesses that are built around essentially these memory layers are also going to be using skills to be able to produce the outputs that you need. So the concept of a workflow or a skill, I think, is critical and one of the key things to be able to get the most out of AI. So now let's jump into my 7 favorite workflows for construction. The first being the project indexer and the drawing analyzer. Now, these are not strictly construction workflows, but the remainder of them rely on a good output from this. So it would be a miss not to include them. Now, what it is essentially is something you run every time you set up a new folder or a lot changes in a folder. So when you get the bid documents, you will go through and actually add them to your folder like you normally would. Then you would run the project indexer, which goes through each one of those files and looks at what the project is about, gets a good understanding of it, and the output is what we call the Claude.md, the project.md, and the first pass of the drawings. So essentially a place where when you're using it in Cowork or ChatGPT work in the future, it always understands roughly what the project is about, and it knows where to go to find more information about it. And why that's so important is because the workflows that we have in construction rely on a range of documents and a lot of context to be able to do it well, and this helps it in doing that. And the second is what we're going to call a reconciliation check. And this is what you run at the end of when you've created your estimate. And so it becomes a double check of everything you've done. Now, the inputs for it are everything to the pricing schedule, essentially, including the requirements register. And the outputs is going to show you any gaps that you have, any double counts, arithmetic checks, and check on your qualifications and exclusions in your price as well. Now, the way it does that is by going through and checking every requirement from within the bid, and then it's going to go through and run the list of typically forgotten items that can come up, like mobilization, site establishment, permits, shop drawings, freight, and all those side of things. Then confirm that nothing is actually priced twice. Run through an arithmetic check from within your pricing as well. And then if you've got benchmark rates that you can put to, so like per meter squared rates or linear meter rates, then it can do a sense check of, are we within the right ballpark? And this is a great fit because the information both exists in one format and in the other, and all we're doing is cross-checking that we've gone through everything, we haven't missed something, and we haven't made any common mistakes. So the big payoff for this is that Obviously, there's a huge amount on the line when you essentially submit your bid and say, we can do it for this price. And so anything that can help you catch errors within that process can be hugely valuable. And so the check or the human point of this is you can decide what comes out from the output, whether or not you agree with it, and if you're going to make any modifications to your bid. But I think the reconciliation check is an awesome workflow to run at the end of your estimate, so you can go through and actually make sure that everything has been done correctly, you're not missing anything or anything along those lines. And the third is the obligations register. So this is on award of the contract. So as soon as that gets signed, what we can then do is have AI do a run of the contract to take out that horrible legal language that makes it extremely hard to really understand exactly what it is that's required of you, and turn it into an Excel register in plain English of tasks. So it can go through and pull every obligation that's within that needs an actual action from you, and rewrite it as a task rather than as a clause. But it can reference back to that clause. So if you do want to check the original wording, you can. And then it can classify it into things like the project setup and tasks required there, business as usual, so things that are required periodically, as well as event triggered. So let's say a variation pops up or something along those lines, then what we need to do as and when that happens, plus any closeout activities to come out. So making it super easy to do and attaching that to essentially like the catch deem outcomes as well. So if you don't respond after a certain period of time, then what does that effectively mean? So this is huge in terms of being able to actually understand that really well, and this falls squarely in the risk category. So let's say it will not save you that much time unless you find yourself going backs and forwards between the contract a lot, but it will help you manage your contracts better and avoid falling into any traps where you miss a certain thing, which may mean that you can't actually put forward your claim for a variation or something along those lines. So a very cool use case. And the fourth is the procurement packaging and scope of works. Now this is actually a relatively big one, so it kind of forms into sort of three core areas. So when this happens is essentially either during pricing or after award, when you're going to go to market and get pricing on procuring essentially the subcontractors and suppliers you need for that. So you need the head contract, the specs, and the drawings essentially, and you want to take a small portion of that and send it off to a set list of subcontractors or suppliers to get pricing from them and their availability and things like that. So this is one where we're sort of going to go into three core steps with it. So the first is obviously we need to have everything extracted about the job and then split it into its trade packages, including the items that we're going to self-perform and those we're going to subcontract. And then along with that, the contract model. Now what that will give you is essentially your package register, where you can assign each one of those to a trade, and then along with that be able to assign a subcontractor that it's going to go out to, and allow you to keep track of where these bids are within that process. So once we've got the package register that we're happy with, we've assigned the subcontractors that we want and the things we're going to perform ourselves, then we can go through and take that package register, and we want to create a scope of works for each package that we're going to send out, which just contains the set of drawings and specifications that that subcontractor or trade package needs. Now, this is a great use case, and I really like it because this takes a ton of time, and as often the onus is put on the subcontractor by chucking them all the project documents, letting them figure it out, and you end up with some awkward crossover in between. So this can help really distinctly define who's responsible for what at the same time. So that's why it's a great fit. It saves you a ton of time, but it can also save a lot of risks in terms of the fact that you can check that it's back to back with your head contract. You very clearly define who's responsible for what, and you're giving them just the information they need. So it makes it much easier for them to price it accurately and avoid those conversations down the track there. And again, this is one of those that has quite a few human checks throughout it, because it's important that each stage we're sort of happy with that process before we move on to the next. and we go through and do it in that way. Now this flows nicely on to number 5, which is actually bid leveling. So you've sent out all of these scope of works to different subcontractors, and now we need to come up and decide with which subcontractor or supplier we're actually going to be going with. And so this is when they come back and we have all the pricing in, and we're going to take those subcontractor quotes in any format that they come in and essentially create a fair way to be able to see what has been included, excluded, and the price in a normalized way so we can make the most informed decision. And that will essentially be the output, where it's an Excel sheet of, say, the 3 to 4 the different subcontractors you've gone through, and directly next to each other, all on the same lines of exactly what you want, who's priced what, for what cost, then what have they missed, and the second part of that, what are the inclusions and exclusions, and how does that affect the risk that's going to be there for you? And so why is this a good fit? Well, the reality is this is one of those things that can often slip when you're busy or you're running your own business. So essentially this part is not something you're going to be spending a ton of time on, and you go with more of a relationship basis, or you just don't thoroughly look into it that much. Then this gives you a super clear, quick visual on where things are at. So you can get a huge benefit there if you don't normally do it. If you do it, it's incredibly time consuming. So it's going to save you a ton of time there. And it's also a good use case because it's sifting through a lot of data, comparing it to one another, and then providing it in a format that actually makes it pretty easy to review if it's got spot on as well. And so you're going to get a big time payoff there, and you're also going to get a reduced risk essentially, because you're sort of going away from that gut feel and you're actually going into a data-driven way to be able to make the decision on who is going to be the best subcontractor for you for that specific trade package on that project. Now, just quickly, there's a ton of ways that you can essentially use these use cases. The way we like to do it is with skills in either Claude or ChatGPT or something along those lines. And we have a community called ContractorOS where we actually have foundational content about how to approach AI in construction, as well as over 100 different skills or workflows and how they link together that run for construction projects and construction businesses. You can install them all in one click or go through and do it one by one. And we also have unlimited calls where you can essentially, if you're stuck, need some advice, you can jump on a call and we'll point in the right direction and go from there. So I'd love to see in the community. The link to join is actually just down on the description. And the 6th one now is actually one of my favorites, and it's the daily site diary. I think this one is huge for a lot of reasons. So when you do it, obviously when you're on site, you've kicked things off, things are happening essentially. That's when you can be starting a daily site diary. And there's a ton of ways that you can go about it, from very simply just having a Claude skill where you can dictate into it what happened for the day and it provides you a structured daily report, to something more of a larger setup that can provide some useful insights later on, where you actually connect a database like Airtable or Supabase, and every one of your reports gets logged into that table so that you can query in the future, say through Claude or something else, and pull lots of insights from there. So essentially it's building a database, and then it's deciding what format you want to take that daily report from. So are you someone that likes to talk it out, maybe with a list of questions you go through? Do you still like to type it, but more of a brain dump style? Or would you rather it go through your group chats for that day and pull out the key things that you need, and then have it sorted into things like labor by cost code, your quantities, plant, deliveries, delays, weather, safety, meetings, all that sort of stuff that happens day to day, you can capture nice and quickly, and it will put it into a nice structured format that you can then save or use somewhere else. Now, why this is a great fit? Obviously, you're taking this unstructured data, which contains all the key information for the day, and you're putting it into that structured record that you need, which is important because no one really enjoys trying to write a daily report in the way that it is wanted to be super clear and easy to understand, because it's hard to do. And it's also the thing that generally is going to happen either at the end of the day or get pushed down the list for the following day. And so no one enjoys getting home and trying to do a daily report. But they are critically important for anything that may happen in the future, like disputes or looking back on things, figuring out what may have gone wrong. All of those sort of stuff are super important stuff for the daily site diary. And so the key payoff for this one is A, if you're doing your daily site diaries, it's going to save you time. And B, there is definitely a very large reduction in risk if you have an excellent record of site diaries for everything that's happened throughout the project. And flowing on from that, and nicely segues into number 7, is if you have that good record, then what you can do at the end of projects is actually be able to do a run through that database, and you can pick out more easily more of the lessons learned. And I really like the lessons learned function, or lessons learned use case for AI, because what it allows is for you to be able to build a huge database of lessons learned and with some key columns or requirements within them, which makes it very easy to sort and find stuff later through very simply just asking Claude at its basic level. If you have it connected to something like Supabase, then you can very easily pull insights on a new project, and there's a ton of ways to use it. But first thing, when does it fire? Essentially, there's lots of ways to capture lessons learned, whether it's noting it as it comes up throughout a project, whether it's doing a scan of all the daily reports from that and the issues that cropped up and how they were dealt with, or the project debriefs that you might have with the client, the subcontractors internally. Having the transcript of those is actually a great way to capture them as well, and essentially putting them into a database so you can easily call on them in the future. And the retrieval side of this is cool as well, because you can search through Claude saying something like, what were the issues we had when we last did a shotcrete retaining wall, or something along those lines, and it can pull out anything you've learned in the past from that. You can also feed it the, say, requirements register from a current project you're bidding, and have a look at some of the things that have caught you out in the past as well. So a very cool way to be able to sort of apply that to it. Now, why it's a great fit is it's because I think there's one of the things that's the hardest to sort of get a good system around in terms of a business is actually capturing all of these lessons learned, because generally it's done is just that it sits in a document somewhere that on a project folder, like specific project folder, that can be hard to find. And if you do know where to go, often you maybe forget, or it moves to the too hard basket as you get busy in the bid process, or actually just figuring out what you're going to do about it. So I don't know if this squarely fits into the saving your time when you're actually going through the process, but it can certainly save you a ton of time if you pick up a key lesson that a colleague from another project has come up against, or you change your strategy around methodology because of that within your bid, and it actually allows you to put through a stronger bid through as well. So there's lots of ways that this can pay off that may not necessarily be the way in terms of saving you a ton of time as well. So that's it. That's my favorite 7 use cases within construction. And I didn't go super deep on them in this video because that would make it extremely long. But if there is one that sticks out for you and you want me to go a bit deeper on it, then put it in the comments and I'll do my best to create something. But if you're just looking to use these and get a head start, then you can jump into our community, ContractOS. The link will be down in the description. And fundamentally, as we look back at what all of these have in common, they are what we would call transformation tools. So in all of these, we're not actually making up information. All of it exists in one format. We're just using it to put it in another to make it more useful, or to be able to do those things that we wouldn't be able to do normally, depending on the resource level that we've got. And then what you'll find is as you build out more of these workflows, you'll find that one will actually feed the next, and then it'll feed the next. So you end up chaining these together to be able to build much bigger workflows through using, say, multiple skills. Like maybe your pre-construction is made up of 15 skills that you chain together to be able to go through to completion. And that's when it becomes important to actually, especially if you're rolling out to the team, think about how these do connect together and how one feeds the other, and where you are going to put that human checkpoint in. Because I think when you're using this personally, you can get away with maybe 5, 10 different skills that you use ad hoc. But at some point, you're going to want to bring those together into a system where one flows onto the next, and you don't end up with a bunch of skills or workflows that cross over each other. And that's where things can get a little bit messy. But anyway, that's it for this video. I won't make it any longer, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.